works at all. But we are talking about the way which is satisfactory unto God. The same Jesus who made this statement is the Jesus who said, I came that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. But as far as the world is concerned, it is true that the gate is narrow and the way is straight, S-T-R-A-I-T, that is like the Strait of Gibraltar. It's narrow, it's hard, and that leads to life. And compared to the multitudes who like it the easy way, there are relatively few that find it. He then goes on to warn us against false prophets. Will you read?
Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns, or figs from thistles? So every sound tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears evil fruit. A sound tree cannot bear evil fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will know them by their fruits.
This problem is dealt with more at length in other parts of the New Testament. And so we will treat it only briefly here, but we will treat it directly and we trust give it due importance. There's a very real question that plagues a lot of people. How can it possibly be that God can bless a man or bless a man's ministry if that man is not totally right with God? The answer, of course, goes back in the Old Testament to Balaam, who prophesied correctly 3 and then a 4th time over the children of Israel that they were going to be blessed of God, and then he turned right around and in his own spirit counseled the king of Moab how to lead the Israelites into participation in the immorality of their temple worship, and therefore brought upon them the judgment of God. In the New Testament does not remember the accurate prophecies of Balaam which did come to pass in God's blessings upon Israel, but it remembers his evil counsel which was given to Balak. In the same way, if we come down to your living room on Christmas Day, and I come in and I say, I see you have a nice Christmas tree. What is that? Is that Christmas tree balsam or pine or hemlock or spruce? You do not look at the angel hair on it or the angel on the top branch, nor do you look at the presents that are hanging on it or placed under it. You look at the needles and you look at the pine cones that grew there. It is the fruit of the tree that proves the kind of a tree it is, not the gifts hung on it. And it is the fruit of a man's life that proves what kind of a man he is, not whether or not God uses him. And let's go one step further. An illustration I've almost worn out is that of a man who decides to reach a community with the message, God is love. And he decides to do it by having billboards all over the city filled with this message, God is love. And he gives this job to the General Advertising Company. And they hire a crew of ordinary men out in the world. And these men have no objection to taking a drink. And it's a cold day in the fall. And they put up several of these posters, God is love. And then they have a drink. And they put up some more posters, God is love. And then they have another drink. And by the end of the day, they can hardly stand on the catwalk. And they get some of their pieces of poster upside down. They have to pull them off and put them back on again. But the fact of the matter is that if a motorist drives into the city and sees that God is love and believes it, he can get saved by the truth being pasted up by drunks. The character of the people putting up the sign has nothing to do with the truth that God is love. And if a man preaches the truth, God will honor the truth and turn right around and judge that same man for his own wicked life. We are to judge men by their fruits, not by their gifts. Now, I think that may solve some problems for some of us. This is carried out in verse 21, which you may read.
Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven.
And read the next two.
On that day many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers.
We have here the possibility of a person preaching the truth, doing church work, doing religious work, doing the Lord's work, doing work in the Lord's name, even going as far as casting out demons in the name of the Lord. And yet he not only says, I don't know you now, he said, I never knew you. So that the motive behind our actions, the motives are extremely important. And not only must the statement be right, must the wording be right, must the doctrine be right, but the reasons for doing it must also be right. He said, you did wonders in my name, but you did it so you could profit by it. And therefore, I didn't ever really know you as my own personal followers. We have a very famous closing parable, which is taught here. We contrast two kinds of foundations. Read from verse 24 through verse 27.
Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house upon the sand. And the rains fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it.
A number of years ago, in traveling in the northern part of Oklahoma, I visited a little town which was going to be flooded by one of the dams which were being built out there in flood control and as a reservoir and as an amusement area. Let's assume that there was ground which was above the level of the lake on the hills surrounding this little valley. There was also some very rich land in the bottom of the valley which was going to be covered by the lake. And that this rich soil in the valley, being better than that on the hills, had made the farmer down there more prosperous. And if he had spent his last month in that farmhouse saying, well, I want this house to be the best house it can be, and so he spent his time painting it, fixing the kitchen cupboards, improving the stairwells, planting plants all around this house, and beautifying it. When it was destined for the flood, what good would it have done him? What good is it going to do any man whose life is not going to be preserved to spend his time when his foundation, his location of his foundation is wrong? A person is not going to be judged, first of all, by the quality of his building. He is going to be judged by the location and quality of his foundation. Now, I don't want to go beyond this without turning in our minds to another passage, which is in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And it tells us there that there is no other foundation that can be laid than that which has already been laid for us in Christ Jesus. But let every man take heed how he build on this foundation. And then he describes two kinds of builders. The first one is a man who builds hay, wood, and stubble, and then a man who builds gold, silver, and precious stones. My own feeling is that Paul had in mind the city of Antioch in Syria when he said this, because in this great combination Greek-Roman city, mainly Greek, was one of the greatest avenues that men have ever built. A street something like 2 miles long, wide as one of our modern avenues. And on each side, at about 50 feet apart, would be a great, beautiful column. And on top of this column would be what today would grace one of our art museums, a great Greek statue. And this stretched for 2 solid miles.